Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this early morning. We're pretty sure people will probably slowly, I can see them still trickling in, but we're super excited to get this show on the road. Welcome to Infusion Online 2020. Just wanted to quickly give some reminders to everyone before we start our panel this morning. So we just want to let everyone know that this is a safe space for each of the discussions that will be taking place today. We have no tolerance whatsoever for any hate of any kind. This includes homophobia, which also includes transphobia, biphobia, anything and everything in between, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, misogyny, and sexism, just to name a few. If anyone engages in this vitriol, they will be promptly kicked out and will not be allowed back in or to attend any of our other infusion events. It's like, trust me, you don't want to do that. You're going to miss out on a lot of fun. And if you notice anyone engaging in this behavior as an attendee, please don't engage this person. You can let us know by DMing us over social media. You can just send us the word you can send us the word flag, and one of our team members who's online will be in the background will be able to hop in and promptly take action steps right away. We thank you all for your understanding and cooperation with this. We're super excited. And a couple more reminders. You can see the schedule on all of our pages. There are a couple of time differences between the Zoom time start as well as the actual panel time start for the last two panels, so just be aware of that. Also, a reminder, you can purchase all these wonderful human beings books at Massey Books. We've partnered with an amazing local Indigenous owned indie bookstore. They're fantastic, their books are fantastic, and we can't wait. And also a reminder, if you post some pictures during this panel, you are entered to win one of 5 copies of Mintie amazing Brown Girl Ghosted. And now I will be handing it over to Roohi Sahajpal of Didihood. Didihood, or the Sisterhood, is a collective of South Asian women in creative industries across Canada, spanning from the media to music to film, visual arts, and lots more. Didihood's goal is to create networking and mentorship opportunities for South Asian creatives in cities like Toronto and Vancouver. They lead workshops for university and college students to expand their skill set, and we get to hear from inspirational South Asian women, like on this panel, and through many other panels, and the monthly Q&A in their newsletter. Didihood also aims to create a sense of community among their members, ideally creating friendship and sisterhood, which I can 100% attest to. So thank you all so much, and enjoy the show.
Great, thank you, Sukhmani, for the intro. Before I begin, I know that we're all in different places, but the base of this event is taking place on the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations. So we would just like to acknowledge that before we begin, and that we're very grateful to be doing this event on this land. So I just want to start off with asking each of you if you could tell us about how you got onto your career path of writing and what that process was like coming from your respective communities. So Mintie, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, it was a long winding road. So I actually wrote, so my book is Brown Girl Ghosted, and I actually wrote this as my first novel 16 years ago. When I was 13, I knew I wanted to write, and I shared it with my father. And, I realized he was trying to probably help me out, but he told me that I could never write without a PhD, a law degree or a medical degree. And that really crushed me. And I have to say, it took me many, many years to overcome that. And writing still it was something I was passionate about. So I was 28, 16 years ago when I wrote Brown Girl. And what happened was I started to get quite a bit of interest from the publishing industry, but I was told, because the main character, the protagonist, was a brown girl, that it would not be a mainstream publication, that it could only be a niche publication. And I mean, to put it bluntly, that pissed me off. And so I put it away and I waited until things changed. And so it was, and then I went and I actually wrote another book series. I came back a couple of years ago, revamped Brown Girl, and now it's out. So it's been a crazy long road.
Awesome. Sabina, how about you?
So I'm Sabina Khan, and this is my book, The Love and Lives of Roxana Ali. It came out last year in January. And I also, like Mintie, I had a pretty long road. I mean, as a child, I wanted to be a writer, but, that was like one of those things that, couldn't really be a career and things like that. So that took a back seat while, life happened. And then around 2010, 2011, I started, really kind of wanting to write a novel. And at the time I was writing, I wanted to write young adult fantasy. And my daughters were reading young adults. They were like in their teens. And so I really wanted to write a book which had, representation, brown characters, representation from our cultures. And so I started sort of, talking about it, I wrote it, and I was kind of, joining writing groups and trying to just kind of feel my way into the, the industry. And a lot of what I heard was, oh, you should try and publish in India. And, oh, it's great that you have so many Indian people living in your, where you are. So, they'll read it. And so the message I got from all that was that only Indian people or people from, South Asian people only those people will want to read about a South Asian character. And so, and, also when I looked for books, there were really none. Like, there was like, it was hard to find a book that had that kind of a protagonist. But I wrote it anyway, and I decided that I would just self-publish. And so when I self-published in 2014, it was, it was a very, learning. It was a great learning experience for me, because what I realized is that, people do want to read these stories. And, and I was really happy that I didn't like just kind of give up, because I was very close. And then the problem with self-publishing for me was that, like I didn't have the kind of funds to push the book, like marketing budget and stuff like that. But I'm grateful I did that, though, that, like I learned all the different parts of the process, because you have to do it yourself, like designing the book cover, getting someone to, design it for you, but also like kind of figuring out what you're going to do and how it's all going to work. And then it was supposed to be a trilogy, and then I was going to sort of, continue, but then I really just lost steam. But then in 2017, when my daughter came out to us as bisexual, I started thinking about the story for Roxana. And I really realized that I didn't really want to just give up and think that, okay, who's going to want to read about a queer Muslim girl, struggling to kind of, hold on to all parts of her identity. And then I wrote it, I queried it, and I was very, I was really, really happy, because it got a really good, like a lot of interest. And, so yeah, so it came out last year, and I'm so happy that, there was a moment, and I remember there was a moment when I had to choose whether I'm actually going to just give up on this idea and move on to something else completely, a different career path, or if I should continue. And I figured I had nothing to lose. And I'm really happy I did, because I think it's, and I'm so happy to see that so many more books are coming out, and things have changed since 2014 when I self-published. So yeah, that was my whole journey so far.
Awesome.
Okay, so I guess my name is Nafiza Azad, and I'm the author of The Candle in the Flame and the upcoming The Wild Ones, which comes out next year. So I'm a child of immigrants. I am an immigrant. I moved from Fiji to Canada in 2001. And like all other brown immigrant parents, my parents, well, my dad in particular, wanted me to become a doctor. And to be fair, I did my best. I took all the science classes I could. Didn't do very well on them, but I took them. And I remember this very vividly. I was sitting in biology class. It was my teacher was talking about fungus and how she was going. If she had a daughter, she would name her mycelia, out of their fungal parts. And I was just thinking, I'm so glad she didn't have a daughter, because imagine, poor child named after fungus. And I got this epiphany, like, what am I doing here? I hate this class. I hate doing what I'm doing. So I came home that day, and without telling anyone, I changed my major to English. And that was it for me. As far as writing goes, I have been writing all my life, but I never quite dared to consider it a career, because we're told it's not stable, you won't earn money, which is true. You don't earn much money, but as immigrants, as a child of immigrants, and being an immigrant in particular, you go for stability, right? Something that will leave you financially stable. And so, and plus there was no one around who looked like me and who was a writer. I didn't even see myself in books, let alone writing books. So there's this whole, this was uncharted territory. And then I did my graduate degree, which was Master of Arts in Children's Literature. So in that degree, one of the ways you can write your thesis is do a creative thesis, which is write a novel. Now, I had never written, I was always writing poetry, but I had never written a novel. And then I was like, it's right here. Somebody's going to guide me. I'm going to have a thesis supervisor who's also an author who's going to guide me through the process. So I was like, let's do it. So I wrote my first novel. And it was an interesting experience. And even though one of the professors told me that I couldn't write, but I'm the kind of person who, when she's told that she can't do something, I'll be like, yeah, well, watch me. So I went and wrote it. And then there was DV Pit, which, I found out about DV Pit, which is a Twitter pitch where you pitch your book. I found out about it the day before it happened. And I was like, well, it can't hurt. So if you're an aspiring writer, don't do it like me. Do some research, find ways to query and stuff. Don't do it like me, because I just went in blind. So I was lucky with DV Pit, and I got an agent out of that. And then we tried selling my thesis novel, which didn't work. Nobody bought it. So I wrote another one, and that sold, and that was The Candle in the Flame, and that's how I'm here right now. Yeah.
Awesome. So you all kind of already touched on this, but my next question is about the concept of kahenge, which essentially means what will people think. So we're all from different communities within the South Asian diaspora. How has this conversation been like for you?
Can I go first? Is that okay?
Yeah.
I just, I'm from the Muslim community, and I have to say that when I decided to write a book about a queer Muslim character, I had a lot of fears and I had a lot of doubts, and the whole thing about log kya kahenge, but the thing is, like, I've dealt with this log kya kahenge, what will people say thing all of my life. I got married to a Hindu man, so I've been living that, because of that. And so I mean, the things I heard, like I heard some ugly things from people who just feel that, they have a right to comment on your personal life. And so when I was writing this, and I knew I'd be talking about my daughter, and I had the conversations with, we all talked about it very openly and freely, and, we're very proud of both our children. And so I realized that I really, I think I'm in a place in my life where I don't care. I don't care what people will say. I care more about the people who need to see these stories than I care about what people might think about me or my daughter, or how, as a Muslim parent, how am I allowing this thing or anything like that. And I was so pleasantly surprised that I didn't really get that backlash that I kept thinking I would get. What I got instead was people from the Muslim community who have been through this experience, very, expressing their gratitude and their enthusiasm for Roxana's story. And it was a really great experience to find out that I was wrong. To be proven wrong about this was really a good experience. And, I don't want to jinx it, because I don't want to have people coming and starting to say things. Yeah. Me too. So that's like, I feel like, we can't be afraid to show the ugly sides of our own communities, and we can't be afraid to celebrate the diversity of our own community. I mean, there's all kinds of Muslims. There's straight Muslims, queer Muslims, everything in between, and we need to, all their stories are important for everyone, not just queer stories for queer people, but all the stories for all the people, as long as we're being respectful and kind. And but again, we can't we can't let ourselves be held back by this fear of what people will say, because then we all just lose out on important stories. That's been my experience.
I agree, but I think the road to getting there, especially because I think this audience is, they're younger, is so difficult. Because I was thinking about this knowing that I was going to be on this panel, and being a creative brown person, especially a creative brown girl, it's already the vulnerability of like wanting to tell your story and feeling like, who are you to tell this, and your worth. Then a lot of times you don't get the validation from your immediate family because of reasons like, this isn't a clear set career path, money, those kind of things. And then when you share it with the community, the well-meaning aunties and uncles who dismiss you, laugh it off, treat it like a hobby, or don't even acknowledge it. And then that's all before you even take it out to the outside world, which, you know, in the institutions and systems that are in place, keep on telling you to keep your mouth shut, that marginalize your stories, that silence you. And, you know, you have to overcome all of that before you even get to the publishing industry, or whether it be TV or film. And in that, sometimes I think it feels very frightening, because you feel, at least for me, it felt like, am I the only one who believes in myself? And am I the only one who believes that this story needs to be told? Because like what you guys were saying, what I was seeing in my own world, in my own life, was the diversity of all of these different, because there's also the problem of when we are allowed to, quote, tell our story, there's a narrative that's already been given to us. I'm Indian American. I came from Assam, India when I was 3 years old, and I grew up in a small Midwestern town. And a lot of the story that's given to an Indian American Hindu, I wasn't raised as Hindu, but I mean, like, in that is the arranged marriage, oppressive parents, which is a valid story, but there's a lot of diversity within that too. But we're only given a certain story to tell, and then that story is marginalized. So it becomes incredibly, I mean, I'm just gonna, you know, I know you guys all have to go through your own process, but if I can save you 44 years of heartache and a ton of money and therapy, let it go. Find your inner value. You're never going to get the outside validation. I mean, especially when you look like us, there's going to be so many people telling you you can't do it and why you can't do it.
Absolutely.
And all the hundreds of, you know, reasons. And that includes who's able to tell the stories we're able to tell. And then even like something as practical as the marketing budgets, the way white writers are marketed as opposed to like writers of color. And in how, you know, I'm happy to be a diverse book, but I'm also just a kick-ass mainstream book too. So, you know, I mean, things like that it takes an incredible amount of, I think an incredible amount of belief in yourself, and you need to find that validation within, because if the publisher gives it to you, a critic won't. You know, it's just such a push and pull with this.
I'm from Fiji, which is very small. So the number of people I know in Canada are very, very small. I tend not to go to these parties where the aunties and uncles are present in abundance. But for me, I remember it came when I was studying, because I did my undergraduate and then my graduate, and then every time like my chacha or like my fufi would call, they'd be like, from Fiji, they'd be like, is she still studying? Even though they call like last month, and there's no way I could have graduated within the time they called. Oh, is she still in school? How long is she going to be in school for? So I had to go through, and then when I graduated, it's like, does she have a job? Or then, you know, like those seemingly well-meaning questions that are actually thorns that prick at you when you're at your most vulnerable. And then when I tell them I'm a writer, so what book do you have out? And that when you are not published, you're like, I don't have a book out, but I'm working on it, and hopefully, cross your fingers for me. And then, so when I did have a book out, I was pleasantly surprised, because my fufis, my dad's sisters, I have 5. They are 5. They all read my book, and they all had opinions, which they let me know very generously. But it was an interesting experience, because I didn't have anything negative about. I think just glad that I had something to do, and that I wasn't like, you know, wasting my time, because that's what they thought I was doing while in school. So yeah, it wasn't negative, but at the same time it was like, you know, that question, when are you going to get married if you are unmarried after a certain age? So so yeah, I mean, if you have aspirations to becoming a writer or doing something that is not conventional, like Mintie said, just go with it, because you're not going to be able to satisfy anyone. So you might as well satisfy yourself, right? So do what is true to you, what makes you happy, because as we've seen, this world is very messed up. This world is very complicated. And you have to do what you have to do. So do it.
And develop a very thick skin because you're going to need it. And
Yeah.
just write the story that's important to you, because like Nafiza said, and like Mintie said, there's always going to be people who will come at you. And you're not going to make everyone happy. So just write the story that's important to you, and know why. You need to know why you're writing this story, because then just hold on to that, and just know your worth. And and it's easy to say, I guess, but sometimes you really have to just ignore the haters and just keep moving forward. And the people who need to read your story, they will let you know. You will hear from them. I can guarantee that you will hear from them. And even one person who needs this story versus like 100 others who hate it, it doesn't matter. That one person will make it worth it.
Exactly.
That one person who said that your story was like it meant so much to them, that will drown out all the hate. Like that's I felt like that, and I'm sure other authors feel like that too.
And I mean, like, surround yourself with, if you're not getting the love from friends or parents, aunties, whatever, surround yourself with the people who do give you that. I mean, even if it's just one or two, I've got like my best friend from childhood, from when I was 11, who will always tell me I'm awesome. I mean, and you need that. You need those little like pick-me-ups, because it does get so difficult. I think just not just being like creative, but because, I mean, we're sharing our souls here. We're sharing, I mean, these might be fictional, but all of the stories have a piece of us. They are, and when we bring our stories, a lot of times we're not just being judged on the story and the merit of the story. We're being judged on the package that it comes in,
absolutely,
and who wrote it. And so it can be very, very hard. But I also think, like Sabina was saying, the reward of just one person saying thank you for writing a story about a kick-ass girl that looks like me makes it all worth it.
I have one last advice, which is to eat a lot of gulab jamun while you're doing it, because you're going to need the sugar.
So I'm wondering if, as South Asian women authors and as brown women, do you feel kind of the pressure to kind of stick to the silo of writing about South Asian girl characters, or are you not? Like, can you write mainstream, like how Mintie, you were saying, like you're just a mainstream author, you don't want to be just, like a South Asian author? Does that come up for you? Are you mindful of that?
Wait, I'm brown and proud, and I'm really happy to be Southeast Asian. But for me, I write books that I wish I could have read when I was like 13, 14, that I wish I could read now. And for me, those story worlds, my characters are brown. That's because I didn't get to see a lot of that growing up. I still don't get to see it. And a lot of times when you see, quote, diversity, it's tokenism, isn't it? I mean, we're, especially like Indian people and Asians are, we're the model minorities. We're the sidekicks. We're the girl who's really good at math. So I wanted to write about, first of all, I dug deep into my roots, because that's what carries me, my ancestors and my connection to who I believe are my female warriors. And I wanted to write a story about a kick-ass brown girl who not only, is the superhero, she gets the guy. And she's not the sidekicks. And that was really important. And that continues to be in all of my stories, because it goes beyond representation. It's about breaking these stereotypes and molds of what people think we're limited to. I mean, like, because if we can't show the outside world like who we are, no one else is going to do it for us.
Yeah, Sabina or Nafiza, do you have any thoughts on that?
Nafiza, go ahead. You wanted to say something.
So for me, it's not a burden or a pressure to write brown girls and women, because I feel like there are so few of brown women out there that, rather than being pressure or being a burden, it's a pleasure to just write these women, different women, because as a Muslim woman, the most often I find reflections of myself in literature is as an oppressed woman who's a white savior, or somebody like from the hegemonic to come and rescue me. So for me, I wanted to write a character who went and had adventures, who was doing the rescuing, who had the power, and who was realized and had agency. So, and who was magic, because in fantasy there are very few brown people in fantasy. We often see ourselves, like, look at Tolkien. The only time brown people make an appearance in Tolkien is as when there's enemies coming, and they're the ones who are slaughtered on the battlefield. And sadly, that has been the case with many other books who feature brown people as Mintie said, as a sidekicks, as the easily disposable characters who are there to build the main character's character. So for me, it's not a burden, but at the same time, I do not feel pressured to write only brown women. However, I'm very aware of appropriation and cultural appropriation and misappropriation, because I feel like because we are marginalized, we have to be doubly aware of what we are writing, the subtext, how what we are writing can harm, because we have been harmed very many times. So we should be doubly aware and careful while writing. So there's a difference between being burdened and writing with awareness. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. I actually want to jump off of that. When I was writing Roxana, I was acutely aware of
Did you freeze?
the family, the Bangladeshi Muslim family, in such a negative light. But I also want to, I also wanted to make sure that I put in there, showcase the strength and support that she draws from her own community and from her own family. So when it comes to being having a white savior or someone like that, in her case, the person who really helped her and saved her was her old Bangladeshi Muslim grandmother, who gave her the strength to fight for herself. And I just wanted, and that was really important to me. Like I did feel that it was not like Nafiza says, it wasn't a burden. It was almost a responsibility in all positive kinds of ways. That I wanted to show that yes, we have, our culture is a spectrum. There's a spectrum of attitudes and mentalities, and not everybody is homophobic. And just like not all homophobes come from certain cultures, there's homophobia across cultures, and you can also draw strength from those people, the people that are related to you, the people who understand your culture, who are from your culture, but are a positive influence. And so I really wanted readers to see both sides of it, that yes, her parents were like this, but then other parts of her family and her friends were very much her allies and gave her a lot of strength. And I think that's important when we have to be extra aware of multiple things, because we not only have to worry about how we are representing our culture to people outside our culture, but how we may or may not upset people within our own culture, within our own community. So but I think, like Nafiza says, I look at it as a privilege that I'm able to write these stories and to share all of these sort of representations with the rest of the world, right? So yeah, I don't know if that actually answered.
If I can just add, I think the point isn't to write white characters so that we'll be mainstream. It's about creating brown characters and getting these books to become mainstream. I mean, because it is absolutely, I mean, I feel like it's a privilege that we get to write about, brown girls who do many different things. And also, I just want to add, my book it's fantasy mystery, but it explores race and identity, inclusivity. And, those things are heavy and they're complex, as we're seeing, especially now. But a lot of times they're only accepted when they're written in such a serious tone around a very serious event. But for me, I love Shonda Rhimes. I wanted a guilty, frothy kind of, Riverdale meets Buffy kind of story. And I think that that's also to show that we can be funny And there's so many different sides of us. And like Sabina was saying, the spectrum.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one more question, which I'm going to get into. But before I do that, I just want to say if anybody has any questions, to please put them into the chat box, and we will try our best to get to them before we wrap up today. So the last question that I have today is, I know that we're all brown and proud, and there's been a resurgence of the conversation about diversity and inclusion. I mean, we're always having these conversations, but now it seems like people are really listening, and it's happening across all industries. So I just wanted to ask, what does this actually mean? And for you, and does it mean anything in a whole, as a whole? Does it change anything in the publishing industry? Is it going to make room for more, South Asian women authors to, come out of this? Just want to hear your thoughts on that.
I think for me, it means like a lot of freedom, because I'm no longer having to worry about, oh, will anyone want to read about a brown character at all? Like the kind of response I was getting where, you should go to India and get published because only Indians will want to learn about, read about Indian characters. So a lot of that kind of thought process is out the window now. I feel like, I mean, not that there aren't, obstacles that will pop up in some way or other, but I feel like we are in a better place. I'm sure we still have a long way to go, but I think we are, as far as even media and not just books, but I mean, if you watch, if you see the content on Netflix and Amazon Prime, and there's a lot more diverse content out there right now, and I think people are enjoying it, and it's sort of, it's great to see that, our stories are just as relevant and just as important and just as enjoyable as the white stories have been for so long. And I think it gives us that freedom that we can now write all our stories, the funny ones, the romantic ones, the fantasy ones, everything. We can write all of it. And we don't have to be kind of painted into a corner where we're like, oh, you can only write about the immigrant experience or only the trauma part of it, right? So I think that's like the positive aspect of it for me.
So I'm happy about the conversation. It's been going on for decades, and that people are finally listening, but it also kind of pisses me off and makes me want to fight harder because of the fact, I mean, like, just look at the Southeast Asian community in North America and think of how many people that is. And then when you look at America and Canada and you count the number of Indian American and Indian Canadian YA authors, you can count them on our hands. That on our fingers. I mean, that is not representative of who we are and what we represent. And so I feel like as we take this conversation further, it's not just about being brown and creative and creating those stories. It's about being in the room where the decisions are made about what stories are told and who tells those stories. So about having brown people who are editors, publishers, studio heads, producers, directors, because that's the only way I feel that we'll get true representation, and where, again, we come out of the marginalized, we come out of the niche, and we become, because we are, and our stories are part of the fabrics of these histories, these countries. And so it's time to see us not as like the scraps of material on the floor. And, the only way I feel that we can change that is by being in control of how those stories are told, who tells them, and being represented.
Really leveraging people into those positions of power where they can make the decisions for, what will be published, who will be, make, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not, I mean, I'm not so naive to think it's just like goodwill and, whatever. I mean, it's a numbers game, but we have the numbers. We have the numbers, so what we need to show. And like Sabina was saying, Netflix and some of the recent movies and things have been showing that inclusivity, diversity matters, that people are going and seeing, they want to see stories that reflect their own experiences and things. So I think if we try to band together to show the power of what we can do at the box office, in the publishing, I think then we can have more representation within those industries.
I completely agree with everything Sabina and Mintie have said. I also want to point out, and this may be super cynical of me, but um, as the discourse around diversity increases and gains speed, and people start asking more from people in positions of power like publishers and studio heads, there is a danger that this diversity will start to be seen as a trend, and people will try to exploit this trend. You know, we've already seen people change their names and submit stories. You know, that guy who wrote the poem that was only open to either Asian people or only Black people. And anyway, we've seen instances like these quite a few times in the past. I also think that the reason I appreciate this, one of the reasons I appreciate this discourse on diversity is, okay, 5 minutes, is so that our stories get published. But at the same time, I feel like we are, I mean, if you, being authors, I don't know if you have had this conversation with your editors and your agents, but we are sort of, they only want to see one kind of story from us. The stories saying about being mainstream. There's a push to see brown stories from us, and only a specific type of brown stories. If we were to start talking about the characters that are different and more diverse than the ones that we are writing, where we are writing from, there's a definite pushback that I have personally experienced. So there's a lot more we have to do. There are a lot more conventions we have to break. There are a lot more conversations we have to participate in, and sometimes these conversations are going to become uncomfortable for both us and the people we're talking to. But I feel like we are just at the beginning. We are just at the beginning of the road, and we have quite a few ways to go. Yeah.
And when we talk about diversity and inclusivity in storytelling, I mean, it's important not to create it around whiteness. You know, I mean, because we are, I mean, calling it diversity and inclusivity, it's from the other, or, you know, we are the other from the main. So, I mean, again, I think we've really made progress when we have true representation, which is like in the marketing budgets and the way that we're, and when we get to control how we're represented.
Because I've heard that people, sometimes publishers will buy books because of the fact that the writer is brown and the story is brown or whatever is diverse, but then they're lost. They don't gain any traction. They're not given much attention. So we need some kind of answerability from the publishers of people in power. You're going to buy that, and then so what? So what are you going to do about the story that you have in your hands? Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we don't have any questions. So just to wrap things up, just wondering if you could each just tell us what we can expect from you next.
Okay, I'll go first. So my next book is The Wild Ones, A Broken Anthem for a Girl Nation. And I'm ridiculously excited to share this story with you. It's about Paheli and her group of magical girls who are all sexual assault survivors and who travel the world via this magical corridor called The Between and rescue other girls in the same circumstances from horrible situations. And it's fun. There's a lot of food, and there's some romance, and there's a boy called Tarana. Yeah.
Cool.
My next one is called Zara Hussein is Here, and it's coming out April 6th, 2021. And it's about a Pakistani family of Pakistani immigrants who are, the father is on a work visa and they're waiting for their green cards, and things go very wrong, and it puts all their lives in jeopardy, their future kind of, in jeopardy because of an act of violence and Islamophobia and racism, and just how she deals with it and how she pushes back and how she tries to find a way to not have to leave the only place that she knows as home. And so yeah, I really wanted to address basically the very flawed immigration system that exists, and also the way people look at her, how the world sees her, and people like her, and how she has to learn to push back and fight and make a space for herself where she feels safe.
Awesome.
And
Mintie?
I am still, because Brown Girl Ghosted is my book, and this came out right in the middle of Corona, so in March. So I'm still Brown Girl Ghosted, and it is about a 16-year-old Indian American girl who was forced to fulfill her destiny as an Indian warrior queen while just trying to survive high school and live a normal teenage life in her small Midwestern town. And it's fun, frothy, guilty pleasure murder mystery stuff. Think Riverdale meets Brown Buffy. So Brown Girl Ghosted.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. It was a really great conversation that we had, and it's so energizing and empowering to hear from brown women who are just living fearlessly and writing what they want and just, doing this important work. So I want to thank you all for your time today.
Thanks.
Thank you, Roohi. That was a great conversation, great questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Moderating and facilitating.